Welcome back, everybody. This to another episode of Eliminate the Gap. Today, we're going to speak with Troy Washington, who is an administrator in Virginia school system, public school system. So we're really looking forward to that. But before we begin there, Eric, what's been going on, brother?
Well, I tell you, it's been the weather's starting to turn, which is pretty exciting. For those of us playing at home, know that we were complaining about the snow and the cold last episode. So now, as it does, the weather's starting to turn nice. So I'm happy about that. Been getting out and about, doing stuff. How about yourself, man?
Hey, well, I was going to say, I'm more of I need to be at least 70-degree type of guy, and it wasn't 70 degrees here. So, while the weather was not snowy, it was not comfortable for me.
I gotcha. It's interesting. Things are really starting to. You could just feel. I mean, spring's upon us, and things are starting to open up. Literally, with flowers and plants and whatnot, and more people are getting vaccinated. In fact, since we last spoke, I've been vaccinated. I got my first shot, and that was great. And I can tell you, just things seem to be humming along. In some places, I'm sure not everywhere, but it seems like people are, more willing to get out there and start doing things. I know you're coaching, so are you getting together with your players for spring football practice?
Yeah, most definitely. We actually are having our football season that we lost in the fall, and we're getting a shortened season. And so, yeah, we're a couple of games in now. We just had our second game yesterday, as a matter of fact. We're 2-0, baby. Woo!
Oh, nice. That's excellent.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're out there. We're all coaches. We're in mask. Players as they're on the field and everything. Obviously, they're not masked. But anytime they're on the sideline and have their helmets off, they have to mask up and things. So
sure. And I'm gonna I've umpired for baseball in the past many years ago, but I'm now officially licensed to do high school baseball here, and I got my uniform and all my equipment. And the season starts here at the end of March. So, like I said, spring is upon us, and baseball is one of those ways. And I guess football during a pandemic is a spring way about it too. So, yeah, and that's good. And to kind of, pivot to the episode today. I mean, schools are starting to open up. Around here, I know that kids are either back in school this week, or certainly will be by the end of this month, back full time. So how are things looking in your area?
yeah, actually, so we've actually had a hybrid system where kids can choose whether they come or not, and we're still going to have that throughout the remainder of this year. But we have had kids in, but we've kind of had it split up, but we're moving more so from like a 6-foot deal to a 3-foot deal here in the coming month. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for us. And we're a little different from some other localities around us. I know some of the localities closer to Washington, D.C. actually are now just starting to have kids back full time, which is a huge change in regards to what they've done since the start of the year.
For sure. And so this topic today it'll be interesting to see what Troy Washington has to share. I know you have your own experiences and being in youth development, have my experiences working tangentially with schools. And then just frankly, we know a lot of teachers. And I was sharing that we're going to be doing this episode. And I have to tell you, there's just a lot of frustration among the teachers I know, at least, with just the way things have been, and they're tired. and depending on what state you're in, the safety, and it's just a whole host of things. And so I recognize going into this episode that we'll only touch on a very, very little part and hear from just a couple people's perspective. We don't plan to, it's not our intention for this to set, and be the case for everybody. But it'll be good for us to at least scratch the surface and begin to kind of dig into it. There's a lot we could talk about the past year and the challenges, and we have to, because it has to inform us going forward.
Most definitely. And just, to kind of add to that, share with us, use our social media platform, share with us. We want to hear from everybody. So, you have something you want to share, please use this opportunity to share with us. And so we kind of get a full, we'll get one perspective today. And like Eric said, we each have our perspective, but we want to hear from all of you guys, really.
So one of the things that, and we can get into this in greater detail with Troy possibly, is I've been thinking, so Child Trends did research on just the effects of the pandemic on education and emotional trauma and things of that sort to young people. And I mean, a 7-year-old facing a difference than a 17-year-old. Absolutely. So there's a lot when we open up, and there's only a few weeks left in this semester, but really thinking about summer school or the fall or whatever, each school district's plans are, is how do you make up for this essentially lost year?
Yeah. A year and a half, really.
That's true. And I heard someplace earlier on the radio today, just really the effects on early elementary and reading and basic, learning that. So there's just and honestly, I don't know what's going to happen or what the plans are. I'm sure we'll figure it out. But again, love to get Troy's perspective as we get into it, yours, and any of our viewers that want to drop us a note in any one of our social media platforms. We're happy to, we look at everything and happy to kind of respond where possible.
All right, so now we're here. We have Troy Washington. He is an administrative role in Prince William County Schools in Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. So we're going to learn today from Troy about what's going on in his school system and just kind of looking forward. What should we expect next from the world of the education world for our youth? So how are you doing there, Troy?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, great to have you, man.
Absolutely.
Great to have you. So I want to kick off the questions here with just kind of looking at this whole pandemic and things of that nature. What's been your biggest obstacle to this virtual education, and how are you addressing those obstacles?
I think there's been a couple of situations. I think right out the gate, for both students and teachers, there was a fear factor. And with that fear factor, how was virtual learning going to look? What was going to be happening along those lines? And I think we had to adapt. I know as an administrator, first-year administrator, I had to adapt. And a lot of people had to adapt to what was going on around us. Students were dealing with the issues of virtual learning. They were also dealing with issues of social isolation. So you had to find a parallel. And I'm probably going to mention these three words a lot as you guys ask me questions to tonight. Compassion, empathy, and flexibility. And those three things I keep in my mind a lot because, again, we're going through a situation. And what I've told myself and what a lot of people have told teachers, administrators for our kids and as administrators for our teachers is you have to put yourself in other shoes because you don't know what they're going through. You don't know how they've been affected by this pandemic. So I think one of the biggest obstacles was just dealing with the teachers and dealing with the students from administrative role. in terms of just realizing everyone's feelings and realizing everyone's fear factor about dealing with this pandemic and going into this new virtual learning that we did. Now, obviously, coming off of the initial part of it in March of 2020, there were some different variations to learning, but it didn't look like what we're doing now. And so I think there was some skepticism there in terms of, is it going to be the same? Is it not going to be the same? So eventually, once we got to where we needed to go, there were just baby steps because we had never done this before. And so that was big. I think the other part of that was, and I don't want to get too much into politics, that's not what I do, but I think the educational field took some hits in terms of, teachers not wanting to come back into the building, people not wanting to be in school, et cetera. And again, they're all different avenues of reasons why people had those feelings. But I thought education, especially our teachers who, as an administrator, I'm number one in their corner all the time. I thought teachers took a big hit in terms of, they're getting paychecks, they should be doing their jobs. I mean, you don't know what the situations were or how things were going. So I didn't agree with some people's perceptions in terms of what was going on. I can tell you, even though in Prince William County, many of our middle school students and high school students are just coming into the building, teachers have been working feverishly ever since the summer because they knew what was coming. The hours of professional development, the hours of how we're going to use this virtual learning platform, the hours of tending to their own families and friends. I mean, there's a lot on the plate. And to have those different bullets coming from each side in terms of reasons and confusion on why teachers aren't doing this or teachers aren't doing that, I thought was really unfair, excuse me. And then the third thing, I thought the biggest obstacle, at least with myself and the administrative team where I teach at, was what is this going to look like when students are able to come back into the building? I can tell you that we've been working in my building, we've been working feverishly since the month of October in terms of what everything is going to look like. PPE, one-way hallways, marked classrooms, limited usage of bathrooms, just trying to be on one accord since October. That was because we were scheduled to come back in early November. The board decided to push it back a little bit, but we kept feverishly planning and doing things, as well as I think other schools in the county in terms of being prepared for what we're in now. And it looks a lot different. It looks totally different. But again, it's something we had to overcome. But I think those are the main three obstacles.
Great.
And in dealing with them, you just kind of deal with them and you just keep an even keel and just roll with it and try to do the best you can in terms of the benefit of your teachers and your students.
No, that's super helpful. And man, you outlined a lot of the sentiment that I hear from teachers around the country, for sure. And so, of course, I have scripted questions, and I'm already going to ignore it, and because this is what we do. Because it made me think, and I mentioned this earlier to Delmar. So I told some folks that we're doing the subject on our next episode, and one of my teacher friends, I said it's navigating the pandemic in school, and she immediately pulled out her phone and showed me a meme of a dog walking itself with a leash, and it says, "This is navigating school in a pandemic." The fact is, as you said it, teachers have been just killing it. They've been working really hard, but man, they are tired.
Yeah.
And I know the morale has to be
Yeah.
low and things like that. And now we're coming back, and there'll be maybe some adrenaline that comes from students being back for folks. But the reality is as you as an administrator are going to have to deal with probably some real turnover and retention, but definitely morale on the teacher side. I'd love to hear just kind of what you think you might be able to do to begin to address that.
Well, I've tried to address that personally, as well as every other administrator in our building. And I'd be shocked to know that many schools in our county or wherever in the country are not doing that. And that's being the biggest cheerleader and the biggest motivator for our teachers. Because like I said earlier, they've taken some hits. They've taken some solid shots in terms of questioning what they do and how they do it. and to just to have the courage just to come back into the building with all these things that are still going on with this pandemic, and be able to sit down in front of a laptop computer and now be able to teach both virtually and in person.
Sure.
I walked around a couple times last week and saw as many as 8 to 10 students in one classroom while the teacher was still teaching virtually. I've taken a step twice a week to reach out to our teachers. Delmar knows this about me. I'm real big on quotes about just life, just things that are just going to cheer you up, things that are going to be meaningful in your life. And so twice a week, I put out emails that are titled It's Tuesday, because that's technically our first day of the week, and then Friday Thoughts. And in those, I throw videos that are positive. I throw in some quotes. I throw in some news articles, anything that's going to lift the spirits of our teachers. It's kind of funny because I did one a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't necessarily motivational. It was more or less, hey, this is kind of what's going on. I think it was a news article. And I had one teacher write back and say, hey, this wasn't as positive as some of the other stuff that you were doing. So I think in an essence, they kind of look forward to that.
Yeah.
As one of the things I learned in administration, your job is not to sit behind a desk per se. Your job is not lunch duty. Your job is not bus duty. Your job is not writing 100 referrals. Your job is to be an instructional leader. Your job is to be visible. So I've tried to, at least since the teachers have been back in the building, times two, get around to each of them. Beginning of the day, end of the day. How are you? How's your day going? You got, anything,
Right.
almost like a coach. I'm finding that a lot of my style of coaching is coming out, because that's what it is. It's motivating people to know that, hey, I care about you. You're doing a great job. As a wise coach once said, let's get it done. Let's get after it. And I think the more and more the teachers hear that, and the more and more teachers feel that they care in terms of administration, the people leading the building, then the more positive that's going to be for everyone. And that just trickles down to the students as well.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome.
Yeah, and we may have jumped the gun there a little bit, because why don't you tell us a little bit about where your school system is right now currently with students and school?
So in terms of personnel in the building, is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we started back in, I believe it was August. It seems so long ago. So we started back in August. The county made a decision, that's the board and all involved, that we were going to have special education students and EL students back in the building. So at Freedom High School, where I am, we are a Title I school, and we have English learners, a large percentage of English learners. So our level 1 and 2 learners have been back by choice. They had the choice to also stay virtual since August. And then we had those special needs students. So those students have been working closely with some teachers who have been back in the building since August, as well as some virtual teachers, where we've set up some, a cafeteria where, 20 of them are spread out, but they're listening virtually to the teacher who might have been at home at the moment. But since, I guess, 2 weeks ago, we've allowed freshmen back in the building for two days just to get them acclimated, because it was hard to think that a couple of weeks ago was technically the first day of school, that the freshmen who were in our building had never been in our building before. And then this past week, we allowed 10th, 11th, and 12th graders in the buildings. So I think on A days, we're about 377, and B days, I think we're about 450, which is nowhere near our 2,200 capacity that we, could get in the building. So,
Yeah.
so far so good. I mean, it's a little different. Lunch doesn't look like lunch normally looks. PE class doesn't look like PE class normally looks. People are wearing masks. People are social distancing. So it looks quite different. But again, I'm always going to be the champion for every teacher or every staff member in that building that does everything. The custodians, the cafeteria workers. Our custodians and cafeteria workers, they've been there all summer, still going strong,
Yeah,
even on our one day of virtual. So there's a lot of people that have put a lot of effort into what I think is a really good thing going on right now.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely.
Um,
So, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm already blown up the script and I'm not staying on it. So just go ahead.
So yeah, just in terms of the pandemic, I wanted to know kind of what do you see as the biggest shift that needs to be made in education right now? Because education has come a long ways just in this past
Mhm.
year. But having seen this at this point, like what do you see as the biggest shift that needs to be made at this point?
I think one of the things even before this pandemic happened was all about equity in education. That's the word of the day every single day, and I think it's been increased even more now with this pandemic. So issues regarding resources, issues regarding the worth of school buildings in terms of what they look like, or things functioning, the community engagement, discipline, like all of those factors were issues or had been issues and continue to be issues through equity. But I think during this pandemic, it's been twofold because you're starting to see more of it. So one of the things that I do in my building is I deal with those who are absent routinely and have reached a max of unexcused absences. And so what I do and another intern in the building is we sit down and we talk to parents and we talk to the child to see what are the reasons why this student is not coming to school. And so one of the biggest issues is technology.
Sure.
Technology in terms of not understanding how to use the laptop, technology issues in terms of Wi-Fi issues, technology issues in terms of just the day-to-day. Can I log on? Can I find my class? Are things going to happen, in terms of service issues where the computer is going to go out? I know in some counties, if students don't have Wi-Fi, the schools have allowed for them to take their cars and or drive the student to a parking lot or certain locations near a bus and use the Wi-Fi.
Wow.
So there's a lot of equity issues that I think have been increased now because of that. And then you have the day-to-day things. I've talked to families that have dealt with the disease. I've talked to families that because of the disease, economic instability is now in place with these families. These things that have been caused by the disease that for whatever reason have been interruptions to the day-to-day operation of a child's education. And so I think at this point, the solution to that is you just got to keep the conversation going. What can we do and what will we do? I think and I don't want to make this seem like this pandemic has been a great thing because it obviously has not, with all the lives and effects that it's had on families. But what I think it's done is open our eyes to different avenues and different ways that we can improve education. If you ask me what specifically, I probably can't pinpoint it right now. But I think just the day-to-day operation, how we reach students, how we connect with students, how we talk with families, how we engage families in different things, all kind of centered around equity and just making education fair for all.
I'm glad you really kind of framed everything under that, because equity was already a point of emphasis in some schools, and now it's really just been elevated. And honestly, we've been exposed where there is a greater amount of inequity. So right. It's very interesting to kind of see it framed all around that area. I'm thinking about the students and the fact that we really have, in some ways, a lost year. I mean, some young people have thrived, but a number haven't. It's just been not ideal way to learn. And so I'm always curious to hear, how is the school going to kind of deal with that? And I mean that specifically, and maybe we don't know yet. Am I making it up in summer school? Am I repeating a year? What's that threshold where before it might have been down here and now it might be more likely to have more people repeat a grade or whatever it might be? How are we catching up, I guess, going forward?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think it falls into the laps of each individual and what the parent or guardian feels that the student was able to receive in terms of their education and whatnot. You know, and this,
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure,
Are
sure,
you
sure.
guys doing standardized testing this spring?
We are doing standardized testing. The whole state's doing it. Oh, was it an option? I believe no. I think the whole state's doing it.
Well,
Right. Yeah.
So I'm sitting here in Indiana, and they're doing the standardized testing, and so in some ways, at least my understanding is that was one of the things that determined whether somebody would move on to the next grade.
Right.
So we're still implementing the same test, but we know we didn't give the same education, you know, for very valid reasons. I'm just curious, and again, this is maybe not answered, or it's answered like 1,000 different ways depending on where you sit. I'm just, you know, it's one of the things I hear a lot out in.
Yeah, I think I think we have to take that into account, and I think the state has put things in position to take that into account in terms of this is not a normal year in terms of, teaching and retention of information. So I think it needs to be on a case-to-case basis in terms of, classes and certain things that students are learning. I know for a fact that there are students that have been successful that are not as successful now, or maybe students that were unsuccessful just finding success in this because they feel like they're getting more of that, attention that they probably would not have gotten in a classroom of 30 or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know it's not a simple issue, and I don't mean to make it unfair to say, Troy, you tell us how it's all going to be fixed. We've got time for another question or two, Del, so fire away.
Well, one of the questions I wanted to throw at you there, Troy, is I know you're a big proponent of building relationships with students. So what's the secret to making connections with students, especially those that you don't share like similar interests with?
Well, it's funny because this is year 27, 28. I can't remember. I should have written it down. But when I started in 1993, maybe 3 or 4 years in, I never forget. And it's a friend of mine that I actually still talk to this day. And we were just sitting in a room having lunch, or it was planning period, whatever the case was. And we were just going and just talking about kids and education and so on and so forth. And when I said it, I was just, half the stuff I was teaching, I didn't know what I was teaching. I had no clue what I was doing. But I was observant to the idea of establishing relationships to kids. And I said, obviously SOLs are important, getting good grades are important, all that stuff's important. But to be honest, every single kid, every single staff member, they're going to remember how they were treated. And if it wasn't for relationships, I don't know if I'd be in this business as long as I have. And what I do is I just take the time to invest in kids. I just take the time to get to know them. I get to know what they're about. A lot of times I try to find that common bond that we might share, or some kind of aspect of their life that, maybe interests me. And I just try to show them that I care. And I haven't met many kids or staff members that are not going to do what is beneficial for them if you show them that you care. And I have a passion for that. There are many students that I've taught, years ago, or coached years ago, and I still stay in contact with them, because my thing is, once you establish that rapport, we're not going to cut it off after you graduate. We're not going to cut it off after you, leave the basketball floor, whatever the case may be. We're going to continue having that relationship. And I think because I invest so hard in terms of trying to strike those relationships, that's why I still feel connected. Many of my ex-students and players will probably notice about me. It's whoever's in my contact. So just keep that in mind. If I have an ex-student or player that's watching and say, that dude never called me, it's the only people in my contact. But I take time, and Delmar knows this. I take time every Christmas and every Thanksgiving, and maybe once during the summer, just to check in, just to say, hey, happy holidays, or just checking on you. And I think that's important. I think that's huge, because again, I go back to the point that, I put a lot into, at that particular moment that I had that student, I took a lot of time to invest in them. And so again, once I make that investment, just like anything else, I'm not going to, move over from that investment. I'm going to stay invested in that adult or young adult or whoever the case may be in terms of what they're doing. Now, granted, I'm not successful with every relationship,
Sure.
but I've been very blessed to establish relationships with a lot of people. And Delmar's right. I mean, that's number one. If someone said, "Hey, you can't establish relationships in education," then I'm getting out of education, because I think that is definitely number one.
And I tell you, I'm heartened by it, and I know it's the case. There are many teachers that feel the way you do about it, and hopefully model that kind of behavior. So this podcast is about positive youth development, very broadly, and so we're tackling a variety of issues and subject areas, but it's generally about positive youth development. And at least as I emerged in the field, as Delmar and I worked together years ago, education and positive youth development, which was mostly seen as something in after school or in out of school time, wasn't so much spoke about or employed during education, informal education. But yet here you are today, talking for your entire career, you have been doing what Delmar and I would call positive youth development, right? You're a caring, consistent adult in some young person's life, who then becomes an adult, and all those kinds of things. That's one of the key components to positive youth development. And always frustrating. And Delmar went on to be a teacher, and I would have never thought to be a teacher, because it always frustrated me that kind of approach wasn't maybe embraced in the way that you just described it. So I'm very heartened by the way you described your approach, and just how meaningful that part of your job and who you are as a person is. So
right. Yeah, and it's something that I have a passion for. It really is, in terms of getting to know people. And it's definitely one of the things that I take a lot of pride in terms of establishing right away. Yeah,
that's awesome. Troy, I can't thank you enough for taking some time to talk to us today. Pandemic heavy and thinking about things, but it's kind of where we are right now. We'd love to have you back when we're really digging into some other areas, around relationships and education and just the future, and maybe rethinking parts of education and all of that. So we'd love to have you back and talk about some more exciting things to talk about. But we certainly appreciate the time that you were able to spend with us today.
Well, I will say this to finalize everything. Even though we talked about some things that are, negative on this podcast, I will say that, there's staff, like I said earlier, there's tons of teachers, administrators, custodians, cafeteria workers that are doing everything in their ability to make the lives of students that much greater. And I do still go down the hallways and still see people with a smile on their face. So all is good. We're going to continue grinding until we get this thing right.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Thanks so much, Troy. We appreciate it.
All right, Eric Delmar.
Hey, that was some great stuff hearing from Troy about where education is right now in regards to the pandemic and what it looks like, maybe even moving forward. One of the things, I've known Troy for a little over 10 years now. And, I do know that about him in terms of his passion in regards to relationship with young people, and just kind of thinking back about some of the things you said, Eric, in regards to the youth development piece and education going hand in hand. Like some of the stuff when I first got into education, I was like, there's things said where it's kind of like, this is like a no-brainer. This is what we do with young people. And that just didn't make sense to me when I first got it started, like building relationships. I'm like, well, how else are you going to get to know kids? Like, what's going on here? So it was really great to hear some of those things from them, and, just to think about moving forward, because really there's a strong correlation to how well kids will perform in regards to at least trying and those relationships.
Yeah, I thought that was really strong. I mean, I really appreciated his passion for it all, especially, gosh, almost 30 years in, and he's still clearly getting a lot of energy from it each day. I appreciated a lot of his attention to teachers and everybody within the school building, right?
Yes.
So I don't mean to short shrift anybody else that's in some sort of role there within the school, but I just know teachers have really been challenged during this time for a lot of things, and we heard the term essential workers early on in the pandemic, right?
Right.
And we were even, we were talking about first responders, we were talking about healthcare professionals, and then we were talking about people who work in the grocery and people that are getting us, delivering food and all these kinds of things. And you just didn't hear about teachers in the same way. And it's always been, I'm sure, very frustrating. And then, honestly, a lot of school systems didn't exactly have a good plan for something like this.
Yeah, right.
And it was very frustrating. And so I really appreciated the fact that he's been honed in on morale and being able to keep, teachers feeling and knowing that they're appreciated and valued. So,
Right.
so that really stood out to me.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, like one of the big things that people probably don't really know is that, I won't say this is across the board, but there's probably a good number of teachers that really don't have a good grasp, at least hitting into this, of technology. Like that's a huge learning curve for a lot of teachers probably out there in regards to taking their stuff from, actual pencil paper in the classroom to now you got to figure out how to put it on some type of learning platform and share it with that. So that technology piece did require a lot of professional development for some teachers out there. So, and that just kind of came to mind as he was talking about that. And I just was thinking, I was like, yeah, that really did take hours upon hours for some people to figure that out. So I just wanted to kind of share that with folks because that's a part that's just missed on a wide scale by a lot of people, I think.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, every episode, we have been doing a community spotlight or a person or a young person. Last week for our last episode, we highlighted a young man making his own sauce, and
Good
being an
stuff.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Good stuff, exactly. And so this episode, it just follows on exactly with what Troy was talking about, and we didn't plan it
We did
in
not.
that way, but many of you might have seen or heard about, because it certainly was a national viral story, but the story of the principal who had a young man in his middle school refuse to take his hat off and wouldn't go to class, and instead of sending him home or putting him in some sort of detention, the principal talked to him. And so we want to kind of highlight that story for you here as part of our good news.
Image that's going viral online showing a local principal giving one of his students a haircut.
He was refusing to take his hat off, and so I sat down with him and asked him why and what was going on. He said he just got his hair cut. He didn't like the way it looked, and he thought his hairline looked a little funny.
Jason Smith is the principal of Stony Brook Intermediate and Middle School in Warren Township. He says he thought the 8th grade student looked fine, but understood that his student's lack of confidence in his own appearance was keeping him from going to class.
I've been cutting hair, most of my life. I played college basketball, and I cut teammates' hair before games, and I've been cutting my son's hair since, for 17 years. So I had professional, clippers and edgers at home. So I said, if I go home and get my clippers and line you up, will you go back to class? And he said, yeah, I will.
After getting cleaned up by his principal, the student held up his end of the bargain and went straight to class. While a perfect haircut may seem trivial to some, Principal Smith knows that for a black boy in middle school, having a good haircut can mean the world.
That age is a time for, peer acceptance is huge, and so young men, especially, African young men, the barbershop's a big deal, in the community, and looking good and representing and presenting yourself, is huge for kids.
While many online are saying this principal went above and beyond, Principal Smith would tell you he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do, not only because he's the principal, but because he's on a mission to change the culture of his school, a place where he wants to solve problems instead of making them worse.
We're not, disciplining with the hard fist. You could call and have that parent come pick the kid up for, defiance. Or you can sit and get to the root of the problem and see, what can I do to help you? What do you need right now?
Principal Smith, who is studying for his doctorate in education, says he's still searching for the best ways to create the best learning environment for his students. He says this viral haircut could be a lesson for all educators on having empathy for their students.
He really was not trying to get out of class. He just thought that he would be laughed at. So we took the time and did what we could to help him.
Cameron Riddle, WRTV.
Dell, wasn't that pretty cool? And again, is very similar to what Troy was talking about, building relationships and
most definitely,
and spending time with students in a way that isn't always educator and student in that way. So I thought that was perfect, and I love the fact that it went viral around the country and was something that a lot of people had seen. So we wanted to celebrate Principal Smith here and give him a moment to be seen by our folks.
yes, most definitely, and it really is. It's all about working to create optimal learning environments, and it begins with having a dialogue, as he had with both parties, where they can express their concerns without any judgment at all. So, being able to have these wonderful positive stories is really a great thing.
No, absolutely. Well, that's a wrap on this episode. We have upcoming in our next episode, we're going to take a shift halfway around the world, as it were. And we're going to hear from Sharouk Zadan, who is in Egypt and has worked in youth development for a while. I won't say the number of years, but she's done a lot of different things, leadership positions, and I know she has many areas of expertise, but I think she's going to really hone in on gender-related issues and girls' engagement and in entrepreneurship and just a whole host of areas. But I think that will be the focus in our next episode. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, that should be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So as always, at the end of this, you'll see our social media places that you could, again, leave us notes. And then I have to announce we are now on a podcasting platform called Castos. Yeah. Castos, Castos, and so it'll be on the screen here at the end of the episode. So we're excited to get a wider distribution and for folks to be able to pick this up and check some things out. So feel free to engage with us, and we'll continue to make this podcast even better. With that, we'll wish you a good day.
Take care.